Meccano part number 425, wheel from the 1970s Army multi-kit set with military spec, guaranteed, run flat. Hi folks and welcome back. This week it's the 11th of the aeroplane constructor set of builds from the 1930s, the cantilever high wing monoplane. And the example model, the airframe that I hope to spin this script around, is the Fokker F-7A, an aircraft designed and built by Anthony Fokker, the gifted Dutch aero engineer. Of late, I've had a run of luck with these scripts, and as always, luck runs out at some point. A lot of the aircraft have been flown by some amazing people with wonderful stories to tell. And as I started my research for this aircraft, my first thought was not so today. As I started to explore the rabbit holes of history, sure enough, people's names started to appear, like ghosts lost in time, walking out of the mists to say, "Remember me, I was somebody." And that has got me thinking. Anything we watch on YouTube is about storytelling, and that's what I hope you enjoy about this channel. And I'm trying to get better at it. For me, part of the enjoyment is also the build itself. But meccano hasn't always been something I've enjoyed. In fact, as a child, I quite positively hated it. But I think my parents didn't grasp the concept behind meccano very well. It was designed from the off as a team pastime, something you do together, whether as a club or as a project with your children or grandchildren. It teaches so much, from pride in a job well done to embracing that we will always fail at something at some point in our lives. It teaches fault finding and the power of sticking at something until you get it right and succeed. And I will always show what I fail at. If you want a channel of perfect models in fresh paint, this is not it. I find the ones I fail at just as rewarding as the ones that I don't fail at, for one very simple reason. In many ways they teach me more, because there is nothing better than trying to work out what went wrong and learning from it. But any project hobby, any pastime that we create something from, helps to balance our minds, to reinforce that we are of some value. And while this channel has given me a lot of things, it's also helped me to find some inner peace. Meccano was also backed up with the amazing monthly Meccano magazine, a read that's still well worth picking up and exploring. Mine are in the form of PDFs that I purchased from eBay, and while I prefer a real book normally, I do find that magazines in PDF form are a lot better. Anthony Fokker was a supporter of the cantilever wing pioneered by Hugo Junkers in 1915. This is where the forces of one part of the wing are transferred to the other side of the wing via two internal struts that run the full length from wing tip to wing tip. While the wing tends to be a heavier wing construction, the ability to remove wing struts reduces the overall weight of the aircraft. A stronger wing also allows you to fit heavier engines, big fuel tanks and a larger wing surface. This allows for better range for fuel carried. The F-7A, which is the test bed for this build, came out of the very successful Fokker F-7. The aircraft was originally designed by Walter Rethel as a single-engine transport aircraft in the early 1920s, but when Herr Fokker was travelling in America, he found out about the Ford Reliability Tour, or to give it its correct name, the National Air Tour for the Edsel B. Ford Reliability Trophy. You can see why it got shortened. He contacted the factory and promptly had his head designer, Reinhold Platz, convert an F-7A to a three-engine model, the F-7A-3M. The most famous of this three-engine model was the Southern Cross that made the record-breaking trans-Pacific flight on the 31st of May 1928. In total, some 39 airframes were built for the Fokker 7A, and at the time that was considered a long run. Seating between 8 to 12 passengers, it was in regular service until just post-World War II, when, to be honest, it had become completely outclassed by new technologies such as jet engines and pressurised cabins. Aviation in the 1920s was full of firsts. People wanted to bag the hat and glory that came with it. And one of those hats was the Atlantic, not west to east. After all, Alcock and Brown had done that in 1919, but east to west. It might seem a strange thing, but going east to west is harder over the Atlantic. The winds travel in one direction, west to east. So if you're travelling against the winds, especially in early underpowered aircraft like those of the 1920s, the gap between doing and not doing is very small. In 1927, Princess Anne of Löwenstein-Wertheim-Freudenberg from Germany funded an attempt to cross the Atlantic east to west. She financed Captain Leslie Hamilton for the attempt at the crossing. Princess Anne had married in 1897, only to have her husband killed in 1899 due to the Philippine-American War of 1899 to 1902. Even though she'd been born British, she remained living in Germany as a German citizen. Sometime around 1914, she began to fly as a passenger, and post-World War I, she befriended a British RAF ace, Captain Hamilton, known as the Flying Gypsy, and the two began to compete together in competitions known as Cups. In 1923, they flew together in the King's Cup race, coming sixth, and in 1925 they attempted a flight from London to Paris. After departing British airspace over Folkestone, they weren't seen again. An intensive search of the English Channel was conducted, but with no result. The aircraft was eventually located in the Paris suburb of Pontoise, where they had been forced down with engine trouble. And before you cast doubts as to Captain Hamilton's motives, as to do with engine problems and having to land, nudge nudge, wink wink, Princess Anne was in her 60s at this point, and Captain Hamilton was in his late 20s and married. They left for their attempt at crossing the Atlantic on the 31st of August 1927, wearing purple leather knee breeches, a matching jacket, a black crush hat, black silk stockings, and high-heeled fur-lined boots. Princess Anne, aged 68, was stepping off into the unknown. Flying with her and Captain Hamilton was Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Minchin, MC, DSO, CBE, and a pilot for the first British commercial airline, Instone Airlines. They left at 07:32 after a bishop had blessed the aircraft, named Saint Raphael. The route was to take them from Upavon in England to Ottawa in Canada. Saint Raphael was last spotted over the coast of Ireland by the crew of SS Josiah Macy. The following morning, the Dutch steamer SS Blendijek reported seeing a white light travelling eastward in the sky around 6 a.m, about 420 miles east-southeast of New York. If this was the Saint Rafale, they were off course and lost. They never made landfall, and the hat of being the first east to west crossing, along with being the first woman to cross east to west, was not to be Princess Anne's. Their bodies have not been recovered, and their fates remain a mystery. However, Princess Anne did get the hats for being the first woman to attempt a east to west transatlantic flight, and the first woman to die in a transatlantic flight. Maybe not what she wanted when taking off. A number of people, including her brother, the 5th Earl of Mexborough, had been strongly opposed to her flying it herself, and she'd agreed to be a passenger. In acknowledgement of what Princess Anne attempted, Ottawa named 4 lakes after the attempt. Saint Rafale, the largest, the Hamilton Lake, Minchin Lake, and Wertheim Lake for Princess Anne. While she was the first woman to die in a transatlantic flight, she was the second to die in a transoceanic flight. The first was Mildred Doran in 1922. I always talk of my enjoyment, even love of these kits. But also, it's the history behind them, the names now long lost to time. That as I research the scripts, they come slowly back to life. As I've said before, that if I can do some justice to these people by bringing their names back to the attention of others, even if it is just for the time that you listen to this, then maybe I've achieved in some small way something of note. Our lives are built upon the achievements of others, and without the vanguard, those who strive to achieve the doing before everybody else, those who tried to overcome what was impossible, then where would we be now? Alcock and Brown, travelling west to east, took a sextant as one of their main forms of navigation, only to become lost in thick fog for nearly 16 hours before crash landing in Ireland. In Britain, between 1911 and 1934, the Royal Aero Club, the board that issued pilot certificates, had supplied 12,545 in total, only 325 to women. Mildred Doran talked in interviews of wanting to prove what she could do as a pilot, standing tall against men. Princess Anne at 63 was no different. She wanted to achieve a dream that she was told that she was incapable of achieving. These, and many men that did the impossible, like my great uncle John Godfrey Parry Thomas, the land speed record holder, strove to overcome the obstacles that were laid in front of them. They reached for the impossible, and sometimes fell on the way, like my great uncle. But that doesn't make the attempt any less great, just because they had reached the end of what was physically possible.